Guys, I'm very excited to tell you that I'm being joined by Scott Cassell. Scott is an underwater diver, a risk taker, was a is a wildlife lover extraordinaire, has been in some of the most precarious situations, and also happened to know Stockton Rush of the submarine that exploded under the depths of the water. So I want to introduce Scott and just show you that this is a brave man who took many risks, but apparently being aboard the submarine was not one that he was willing to take. Scott, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me tonight. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, just to give the audience a little bit of background about you, let's go back. How did you get in to diving, to being underwater, and how long have you spent underneath the ocean?
Well, as of this year, I'm 61 years old. As of got 15,000 hours underwater, um,
Wow,
and about
1,000
seven
hours.
submarines. So I like being underwater more than I like being on land. I feel awkward on land.
Why do you
Uh,
feel so comfortable underwater? When did you start? Was that at
yeah, I had a rough childhood. My mom and dad were both alcoholics and very abusive, and the ocean, was a nice place to go and relax, but I was a very much a student and lover of the Jacques Cousteau National Geographic shows. And it was the thrill of the hero, Jacques Cousteau, and the Cousteau divers, the divers, that inspired me. Hey, right next to me is the ocean. I can go and explore it. And kind of like the ocean became my pseudo mother. It's a place to go and relax and unwind and recover because there were lots of things that happened to me. I'd go to school with black eyes. My 15th birthday, my dad broke my jaw. So,
oh my
I
God.
saw everything in the ocean as good and everything on land was suspect. So the ocean drew me and it has my whole life.
And I understand, I read that you became a professional driver, that you were the youngest person to pass the test at the age of 15. Did I read that correctly?
And you found that. I'm really impressed. Yes. I was 15 years old and I paid for that by mowing lawns and moving, uh, you know, old trees out of people's backyards and stuff, just doing odd jobs.
So you got into diving at 15, you were a professional diver. Did you immediately start to make money on that? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah? So
Yeah.
what did they pay you to dive for?
Well, back then I had amazing amount of money. I was making like $7.80 an hour, which, back in that time frame was a lot of money. So
Yeah,
I think minimum wage was a dollar 29.
yeah,
I was making just tremendous amounts of money. So, but of course, as a commercial diver, you work when there's job, and in Atlanta, Georgia, the only place to work was, right there in Savannah or right there in the harbors and stuff. So I did a lot of salvage work. So, but
for
it
ships that had sunk and you went underwater to gather.
yes,
And
yes.
how risky was that? Did you think it was risky? Did you grow into it? Did you have experiences where you learned to appreciate the dangers of that environment?
I had so much fun. It wasn't work at all. I, to me, it was just I could actually hear the theme of the Jacques Cousteau music in my head when I'm down there working. And I wasn't the best diver at 15 because at 15 you don't know anything, barely your
Uh-huh.
dream. So I was a journeyman, and everybody was just always just um, being very kind to me, but expressing, you need to do this right. You're doing it wrong. You don't know what you're doing. So
So how did your experience underwater develop to the point where you spent 15,000 hours underwater? I mean, that's a lot of oxygen to put on your back and to have streamed into you.
well, and a lot of my dives were actually was it was pumped down to me in umbilical hoses. So I
Mhm.
eventually became a bell diver and then a saturation diver. Then I became a diver medic. So I actually ran the hyperbaric chambers on deck and treated people that were hurt. And I was always everybody's best friend on Monday morning because of the hangovers.
Uh-huh.
We'd start an IV, put them in the oxygen under pressure, and your hangover's gone in minutes. So,
Wow.
so I was everybody's friend because I was too young to drink. So I was just always taking care of those that would come in all beat up.
So
So
this
I
is
love
all
it.
before you were 21.
Yes.
Wow. And then you got into the Army.
Well, I joined the Navy first.
You joined the Navy
And
first.
yep, I joined the Navy first. But the funny thing is that I'm mildly colorblind and I couldn't pass the diver test for the Navy.
Even though you've been underwater at that point for thousands of
Yeah,
hours.
probably. Yeah, probably close to 1,000 hours by that time because I joined the Navy when I was 15,
When you were
17,
15, 17.
17. I was 17
Wow.
when I joined the Navy, and you know, I was heartbroken that I couldn't be a diver, so I ended up being a draftsman at first, and then I became a corpsman, and then I got out of the military, and I just couldn't exist in civilian life very well. I was a Kinney shoe store salesman and doing all this kind of stuff. I was married, and my wife at the time was a landlocked girl from the middle of Texas, and she had no idea that diving was a real job. So I had to get a real job selling shoes.
Uh-huh.
So out of the Navy, and after a while, I got back into diving and became happy again. But I still needed more, so I joined the Army National Guard and did a lot of active duty Army work with the Army National Guard, and spent enough time to basically retire. Um, and had, in my opinion, I had some of the best jobs in the Army because it started out as a medic, and as a medic, you learn all about the everybody else's jobs. You know what everybody needs because everybody needs a medic from time to time. And I learned how to pass the color vision test, and so I ended up passing the color vision test and became an enlisted co-pilot as an Army.
How did
Uh,
you pass it when you're colorblind? Did
you know,
you learn to
I
did you
learned the
learn to
chart.
identify colors based on the grade of black or how dark it or light it is?
I learned the charts by memory, and I also was able to define more color just by learning the differences in the texture of ink. So I passed it, and not only did I become qualified to fly in the Army, I became a flight instructor. Uh, so I was a flight medic, I was a Aero Scout observer, and both of those jobs I became flight instructors on. And so I didn't just become that and squeak by. I worked really hard at it, and I became instructors. But then I later got into military diving, became a combat diver. Once again, as a medic, you get to go everywhere, and ended up becoming what they call a scout, which is
Uh-huh.
uh,
A
very.
scout sniper or a scout diver?
At that time, I was just a scout,
Uh-huh.
which is cavalryman, and you're the forward observer. You call in the fire, you look for bad guys. You're ahead of all of the rest of the army. You're the ones that are scouting out where the enemy is. You try not to make first contact. You define where they are so that the big power that's behind you can come in and wipe them out. So the scout has tremendous amount of power because he has a radio
Uh-huh.
map, and he can call fire with Air Force, Navy, Army assets, even Navy assets from shore. Big, if you're close enough to shore, you can call in big ship fire and what you're looking at. So a scout sniper is something I became, but just a scout is a very powerful position because once you find the enemy and you determine where they're at and you call for fire, you have the power of an entire battalion or more.
And where did you participate? In what theater of war did you deploy these skills?
I was one of those soldiers that was just in the age group where I didn't get to go to some wars. Most of my fighting was actually in the drug cartel stuff in
Oh,
Central America,
oh wow.
and of course, Bosnia. But when it comes to actual wars, not so much because I was already in in the Army National Guard, and they were the last to be deployed. So I became a military contractor and went anyway. So I served in Iraq and Afghanistan and Africa and different countries.
Wow.
Uh,
I had a roommate who was a Marine Special Forces sniper,
yep,
and
worked on.
he told me that he goes out there and protects us out there and risks his life so that we can have it easy here and not have to worry about that.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah. I mean, I've seen the worst in humanity. I really have. I've seen the worst in humanity. I want you to pause and think about that for a moment. I've seen people murder children. I've seen the most horrible things you can imagine. I've seen it, and Americans have no idea what's out there in the real world.
We
And
are protected by the likes of you, by the snipers, by everybody that risks their life. And we, as Americans, have no idea because we haven't seen it up close. And we think that that should not be part of our existence. So we then worry about so many other trivial things like the color of somebody's skin or whether or not the pronouns are being used correctly. And you're out there allowing us to engage in these theatrics.
well, I never really thought of it all like that. I just wanted to do the best I could for the people that were around me, honestly. I love my country. I am very much a patriot, but I'm not feverish about it. I just know it's the truth. We live in the greatest country in the world, even though it's in decay. We're still the greatest country in the world. And we've done more for people around the world by giving for. I mean, the reason I was in Somalia in the first place is because we were trying to save people that were being starved out by warlords, preventing people from getting the cherished tiny amounts of food because of famine. And the reason that all of these famines have occurred in Africa for the most part, Somalia, Ethiopia, that's because of us in the first place. I mean, back in World War One, we created the British primarily created. They introduced new technology called drilling for water, and they tapped into artesian water supplies, which are finite. They're not resupplied, and they used this incredible water source to introduce agriculture. And so all of a sudden, there's all this food in these countries that never had it before. They were basically a Bedouin type culture with desert ancestry, and it was just a very harsh environment. Created some of the
Mm-hmm.
finest warriors in the world, I will say, but harsh environments usually do. But the point is that all of these populations exploded because of this technology.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the 50s and 60s, when that water ran out, these giant populations of people no longer had food and they all started to starve to death. And now we have the artifacts of entire populations of people that were starved in famine, that weren't able to fully develop as humans because of the starvation. And they've got all kinds of social, physical, mental disorders because of simply being starved their whole lives. And now they're in a position where the only way they can survive is to own the rights to dominate the food supply, what little there is. So that's a war torn country because the water's gone and what food is there is more powerful than bullets. And so, we created that with our technology, and we're facing that. And there is no answer. Sadly, no technology is really going to fix that unless you develop desalination plants, and that's a whole new bag of worms there. So the problem is that all of these problems that I've been able to see first off were human created, and that's why I kind of gave up on humanity and went back to the sea. And I would come back from seeing the worst things you can imagine, the worst things you can imagine. People blown up, people burned up, people, I mean, mass graves. I mean, I'm not even going to tell you what I've seen. I go underwater and it all goes away. I see the beauty of life. I see the beauty of sharks. I see the magnificence of a coral reef. I see the kelp forests, which are my version of a cathedral towering overhead with those beautiful lights coming through the kelp. That's my place to pray. So the ocean once again became my ocean, my savior, my mom. And so when I wasn't doing crazy shit as a mercenary or as a soldier, I was in the water. And that's why I recovered. A lot of guys have sports and they drink or they do drugs and they do whatever they can to get away from their PTSD. I just go hang onto the back of a tiger shark.
Well,
And
that's amazing, and I would definitely want to talk to you more about the sharks. When you, oftentimes, when I'm in nature, I think I know what you're feeling and what you're saying. You can be in a place where you have to be fully present, either in order to survive or because the place is so spectacularly beautiful. Like in the Andes Mountains of South America, there's some areas there that when I've been, I'm gazing and my breath is taken away and thought leaves my mind. And then I'm concentrating on my next step to make sure that I don't fall. And every ounce of my being is kind of lit up. Is that what it's like for you underwater?
that's a very good description, Richard. I couldn't have said it better. You're 100%. You're dead on. Um, Everything I've done has been kind of on the edge. I mean, I don't go scuba dive to go for entertainment. I am what some people call a citizen scientist. I just prefer call myself a researcher or an explorer. And I try to get film of behavior or animals that are very difficult to film and let people have access to that know more than me, that can make some assessment as to what it is that I saw. And that's why I started with Humboldt squid. My whole life was all like, 20,000 leagues under the sea and giant squid when I was a kid.
Explain what Humboldt squid are to the audience.
Oh my God, the Psittacus gygus. It's a magnificent squid that is human sized. They grow from the size of a sesame seed up to as big as 8 feet and 200 plus pounds in less than 2 years. Now that's the same as a human baby growing to the size of a blue whale in the same amount of time. So the growth rate is absolutely extraordinary, and they're always hungry. They're voracious. They're vicious, and they're problem solving intelligent, and they learn faster than most primates. And so when you put a problem in front of them, they are thinking, how can I eat that safely and not get hurt? It's extraordinary. I've seen them. Um, I tried to hide in a shark cage once, and one of the squid opened up the shark cage up off the top. He didn't touch any part of the shark cage. He touched the latch. And
Wow.
he touched the latch
And
because
were
he
they
saw
trying to
what it
eat
did to
you?
lock it.
Did
Yeah,
they
to
see
get in
you
me,
as
right.
food?
Yeah, to get into me. Yeah.
Wow. And how did you
So
fend that off? Uh,
held onto the lock.
You held on to the lock.
Yeah, but I later learned how to dive with them without cages and just with chainmail armor or body panel armor and stuff, and cabled to the boat. They'll drag you down.
Yeah, I saw a video of you. It was on the Discovery Channel, and they came after you and did try to drag you down. And you had to stitch up your neck because the beak is so strong. It's like being bit by a crocodile.
It's bad. Yeah, it can amputate your hand in about 2 seconds or so because they're the beak is as big as a man's hand, and it is as sharp as trauma shears, and it has the power of a vice. So it's a remarkable piece of equipment, and the chitinous, the polysaccharide that it's made out of, self sharpens as it grows, and it flexes, so it finds the path of least resistance to cut through whatever bone or body part that it's incising through. It's extraordinary. So it can take a bite the size of an orange every 2 to 3 seconds, and hang on to you. Just keep biting. So whatever the beak can cut off can be swallowed through his brain, which is shaped like a donut, by the way. The throat goes right through the brain. And so it actually feeds on you while you're still alive. So they don't care to kill you and make sure it's safe to approach you like a white shark will do or like a tiger will do. They just grab you and start eating. And
Oh my God.
they never travel alone. There's hundreds of them and sometimes thousands. And so
Thousands of these Humboldt squid that are 8 feet long, 200 pounds, attacking
absolutely.
anything within sight.
Yep. I've filmed them. I've in one frame of film I counted 111 6 foot squid that were about 125 pounds apiece.
Oh
In
my!
one
And
frame of film, yeah, it's
do
incredible.
humans fish these? Like, is this what we're going to be eating in a sushi restaurant?
Well, I would, it's too bad because young squid, different species like Loligo opalescens and uh, other types of, like Neuroteuthis and stuff, they're actually delicious tasting animals. The problem is that these are big squid. They're one of the five giant species. So whenever they grow to a certain size, that they don't have a swim bladder. And so what they do is they start to chemically change the muscle tissue. And as they become heavier, they store more uric acid
Uh-huh.
inside every muscle cell, which that uric acid ion is lighter weight than the water molecule around it, so that it helps it float. Doesn't have a big liver like a shark full of oil, doesn't have a swim bladder. So they transition to having this uric acid in their muscles. So eating a big Humboldt squid is like trying to eat a tire that somebody peed on.
That's kind of gross.
Yeah,
Well, I
not
take it
good.
that's why we don't fish them.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
so what are the predators of the Humboldt squid? In the what
Marlin,
keeps the population in check?
animals that we like to eat. One that we don't, the elephant seal is a predator, but also sperm whales. But the biggest predators were tuna. Tuna populations less than 3% of what it was. Marlin. Marlin percentages have dropped. Thank God, it's a fast reproducing fish. Swordfish, but also sharks. Primarily the sharks that we like to eat primarily in China for shark fin soup. The pelagic species are big predators of the Humboldt squid, and their populations have declined incredibly. The oceanic white-tip shark in the last 40 years went to a healthy population to less than 1%.
Oh my God.
99% of the oceanic white-tips are dead because of Chinese white shark fin soup. And my favorite shark in the world, the blue shark, which we had a lot of here in California, they're almost gone. Same reason, because they're pelagic and they travel all the way into the areas off the coast of the Philippines, which most of the Chinese purchase of shark fin are through the Filipino fishermen.
And
They
you mentioned to me offline that the Chinese emperor was the aficionado of shark fin. What happened to Chinese who used to try to eat shark fin in the time of the emperor?
Oh, they were killed
They were
because
killed.
they couldn't eat that animal. You can't eat a major predator like a bear or a shark or other big predator because you would embody the power of that animal and you'd be a bigger ruler and potentially a threat. And so you weren't allowed to eat that under pain of death. And now, the last 40 years or so, with the largest economic transference of wealth in human history has occurred with the last 40 years with the rise of China. And every this myth, this lie that Chinese eat shark fin soup because it's their culture is a damn lie. In fact, it's the opposite. They weren't allowed to eat that. But now they all basically consider themselves all emperors because of their newfound wealth. So, hey, if the emperors ate it, so am I. So it's a fashion. The shark population of the world has declined because of something as fashionable as blue jeans.
Wow. And it's a status symbol now in China.
Yeah. It's
Wow.
tasteless. It's not very good nutrition wise. In fact, shark species of the pelagics have a high percentage of mercury. So it's really not a good fish to eat. These bigger sharks that have big oil-based livers, and so they sequester a lot of mercury. So we're talking about a high mercury-based, tasteless, nutritionless thing that they eat, which is causing an entire shift of the ecosystems across the globe. Now that's genius.
How does shark fin soup affect the population, affect the actions of bears in Alaska?
I love that question. I actually did a little research and I came across a statement that I made in one of my documentaries, and I've gotten a lot of heat from it, but I'm right. For the first time in a long time, about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, in Sitka, Alaska, they had Humboldt squid, and they were eating salmon that were waiting to go upriver, and the situation was incredible. The fishermen were pointing out that they started catching Humboldt squid. And they'd never seen this before, but they know what a squid is. These are smart fishermen, and they're waiting for the salmon. The salmon are acclimating to go upriver, so they were in the brackish water, going through that acclimation process before they swim upriver. And they're all congregated, and the Humboldt squid populations found them and wiped them out in a day.
And
And
the
up
Humboldt squid
here,
are there because
because of the population explosion, they started pushing further and further up north to find food. And what they found were these vulnerable populations of salmon. And up the river, when they actually spawn and then they start doing the fishery to catch them back out, the fishery stocks were incredibly low that year. And it's largely because the assassins from nowhere showed up, the Humboldt squid, and wiped out huge swaths of salmon.
and then this affects the bears, the
Yeah.
bear behavior in what way?
Well, if you don't have a lot of salmons going upstream, when this happens pretty much when a lot of the bears are preparing to go back into hibernation, and the animals, the skin of the salmon is pretty high in fat and oils, and so the bears really like to eat that, as well as the meat, but and the eggs. But the bears of these areas that the Humboldt squid wiped out the salmon found themselves all of a sudden there's not a whole lot of food there. And so they had more human interactions with bears because the bears
Hmm.
didn't find the salmon. So they started going in dumpsters looking for food and foraging for food. So they're in preparation for hibernation. So they're really, really trying to gather this up. And more and more bears were killed um, because of this. They had a few problem bears. I mean, not a whole lot of bears. I'm not saying hundreds, but I'm saying there were several bears that were killed higher than normal, and it's
Hmm.
because of this. So it's linked to the Chinese eating the shark fin soup, degrading the population of these sharks. Population explosion of the Humboldt squid occurred at that point in time where they went up to Sitka, Alaska, all the way down to Anchorage, and they wiped out large swaths of salmon. And then the bears were going a little bit hungry, and there were more interactions with people because of that. So the world is connected in ways we find amazing all the time.
It's the ripple effect. One thing affects the other, affects the next, and it's a cascading effect
It's
in our
absolutely
lives.
amazing, isn't it?
And
Yeah,
so somebody that gets attacked by the bear is because a Chinese person unknowingly that this is going to take place is eating shark fin soup. And
yeah,
that is that's directly correlated to an imbalance in terms of the bear energy and stability, and then they go after easy prey.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's amazing.
there's just the reality of where is life energy, living, and where is it harvested. And if you have a large population of sharks, which are of course the gatekeepers of the seas, the master predator for the most part, with exceptions, of course. I'm a fan of sperm whales, which they eat giant squid too. So we'll go about that another day. But if you remove those sharks, and then all of a sudden you have another population explosion. In this case, it was Dasyticus gigas, and then they're foraging and they're going further north than people have seen before, and they're ravaging what they can find, species they've never encountered before, because
Uh-huh.
this is a problem-solving intelligent squid. They learned how to eat a new prey item all the time because they can figure stuff out. And here they are eating salmon, which they've never encountered before, and they wipe out in populations. And then the bears go hungry, and they're out there foraging in people's backyards. So it is incredible how all that tied together. And it hasn't happened a lot since, but and I forgot the year that this happened. It was about 15 years ago, but it was extraordinary, and I'm sure it's going to happen again if it hasn't already.
And do the fishermen, knowing what's taking place, do they take action and potentially attack the Humboldt squid? Is that even a possibility?
They do in Mexico. They do harvest Humboldt squid, and they use it for pet food, stock food, and fertilizer.
Okay.
So it is a good animal harvest for that. And by the way, just so you know, the first population of Mexicans in Baja that encountered Humboldt squid was approximately 1971.
Uh-huh.
They'd never encountered them before that.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting how they encountered them there? Wow, what is that? And then within 2 decades, they're inundated with them, which was the same time of the largest transference of wealth in human history, which was the rise of China. Kind
Yeah.
of funny how that works.
Where did the Humboldt squid, where was their original base before that they came to Baja?
Off the coast of South America, Chile, Peru,
Uh-huh.
primarily, Patagonia, and they are also very big there. The ones that I saw of Patagonia were the 8 footers. They are massive, and I showed you a picture of me holding an 8 footer. Uh,
Yeah.
Scientists say, "Oh, there's no 8 footer." Oh, really? Here's one. Take a picture. The thing was as big around as a 55-gallon drum. So it was huge.
Wow. It's
Yeah,
it's crazy. And tell me, you are a risk taker. What I've done stuff that a lot of people consider very risky. I
yeah.
would never get up close to a great white shark and try to hand feed it. Have you done that?
I have, but I stopped doing that. I don't want a great white shark to relate human as food. So what I ended up doing is I did something different. I have a little white disc about this big. Of course, what is the color of fish meat underwater? It's white. And so I would have a white disc, and um, the white shark, one particular white shark that I ended up being a big fan of, and I want to forgive me for saying this, but I felt she was a friend. I loved her, and I dove with her for about 20 years. Her name was Spots, and uh,
Where was she? Was she just circulating one area that you frequented?
well, I would see her every year off Guadalupe. Um, but I had this white disc, and she would come up and she would identify the white disc as me, and she'd come up and she'd test bite the white disc, and she'd realize it's not food, but she had to test it.
Uh-huh.
And I would swim alongside, and I just grab onto her pectoral fin or dorsal fin. By the way, pectoral fin at the base was 8 inches, big, big. It's like hanging onto a giant. And but she was a sweetheart. When I first touched her, she flinched, and this is a 3,000 plus pound animal. And when I touched her, this 200-pound monkey touches her, and this 1.5-ton animal flinches, like, "Oh my God, don't hurt me." I thought that was extraordinary, and so I scratched her on the back as she went by, and then she came back and she took another test bite of the circle, and I rode on her back, and she didn't speed up. She didn't try to shake me. She didn't try any movement. She just accepted the fact that I was a naked monkey remora, and she took me for a little cruise and dropped me off right next to the cages about 10 minutes later or less, about 8 minutes later.
And the first time that you experienced this head on, face to face with one of these gigantic sharks that has the potential to end your life like that, how did you feel?
You know, some sharks are sweet, like a dog that you can pet, and then there's other dogs that that if you try to pet them, they're going to bite you. So some sharks are dicks, and so you just take the time in the shark cage where you're safe, and you
Uh-huh.
watch them over time,
Oh, I
and you get
see.
to learn who they are, and you get to learn their mannerisms. And I found out that when Spots was around, who's a very large female, she's 16 feet, and when she was around, all the males were far away. They didn't come anywhere near her because they were half her weight. And so she was the dominant animal. The males were more aggressive and would hurt you. So you never ever got out of the cages when there were males around. There was one male that was different. His name was Shredder, oddly enough, but he was the sweetest of all the males. And we would pet him as he went by all the time. We got some great pictures. We know Shredder because his dorsal fin has a big jagged edge out of it where another shark had bit it out, probably a female, which is why he evaded being close proximity to the females. But he was a sweet shark. But both Spots and I think Shredder were killed for their fins.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
We found Spot's body on the shore in Loretto,
With the spin off.
where she was caught accidentally with a pig's head on a welded hook suspended by a 55-gallon drum, which was anchored to the bottom. So that was an accident. And when they accidentally caught her, they could harvest her in Loretto. See, they're protected, but if you kill the animal, you can harvest it. So she was killed for her fins, and I've been heartbroken ever since. That's been almost 10 years ago.
Wow.
She was my friend for 20 years, and she was killed for her fins. So I take this personal.
I can imagine. I mean, when I was in China, there's just a certain ego there. I was only there for a few weeks, but I did not it was there right before the Olympics. I can only imagine that it's escalated since they've gained in wealth. Everybody was trying to rip me off, is my feeling, and I have not had that nearly as much in other countries. That was definitely how I felt there, and I've just ever since I just am. I wish that other people could understand what it's like to live in other countries and the freedoms that the United States offers us. If you talk badly about the king in Thailand, which is a very feminine society, they'll put you in jail for 20 years. And here you can criticize Donald Trump till the cows come home, and
Yeah,
people are going to go, "Oh, you're so brave." It's
yeah.
just,
Well, it's a form of cowardice to attack somebody that can't fight back, and the media has allowed a whole bunch of cowards to exist.
it's
But that's just a reality that I face. I see people attacking people that can't defend themselves, and it takes me back to people I saw murdering children. As far as I'm concerned, they're only one step removed.
Yeah, well, that is the direction that we're going. I mean, unfortunately, not to make this all about politics, but I mean, when you see people that want to medically castrate, and then literally do so to teenage kids that are confused or naturally gay, and these people believe that they're on the right side of history, is what they're always going to tell you. I have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. Excuse my language.
I mean, there are some other times in history where that type of perverse, violent sex and pedophilia was allowed, and I think they called him Caligula.
Yeah,
So, historically, we look
good
back and,
guy.
oh my
Good guy.
God, what a horrible, sick person. Well,
Yeah.
we have people like that right now doing the same thing to kids and women. I mean, women are being just totally destroyed in all types of places, including sports. These poor girls work their whole lives to get into something really cool like a scholarship, and you get this creep that pretends he's a girl. He puts a little duct tape in a strategic place, and then he does the event and wins as a girl. And a few minutes ago, and at that time, he was a guy, and
Yeah,
that's okay for some. Well, to me, you might as well just take those girls, take them out back, and take a baseball bat to them and beat them. It's the same thing. It's the same mentality.
it
It
is
is
a
being abusive
disgusting.
to
Yeah.
girls. It is being abusive to girls. Now you got to remember, I've seen the worst in humanity. I really have. And I see people here that are just one step removed and they're walking amongst us all over the place and they're called woke. These are dangerous people. These are
They
dangerous people.
they have no appreciation for somebody like you that is out there in foreign lands, unbeknownst to them, protecting their way of life so that they can exercise their freedom of speech to yell at other people that disagree with them and then demand censorship of them. Everything that you are fighting for our freedoms, for the United States Constitution and our Bill of Rights, which protects our right to communicate freely with each other and criticize Joe Biden and criticize Donald Trump. And don't you dare do that in Thailand or in China or even in Russia. It's it's just unbelievable to me that people don't understand this and take it for granted. And it's because they haven't faced any adversity in their life. And this is kind of like there's laws of physics. When you're with a shark, you have to be very careful to know what that shark is about, to not make the wrong movement. Is that an accurate statement?
Oh, yes, it is. You have to play by the rules of nature because if you don't, nature will take a pound of flesh, if not end your life. Well,
Absolutely. If you're in the mountains and you make a wrong move, if you think that that snow that is on that glacier, that there's land underneath it, and you are wrong, you cascade, and the condors in the Peruvian Andes come and get you. End of story. And
it's
that's
completely true.
life. But we
Well,
are,
that's analogous to freedom. You have the freedom to act like an idiot. You have the freedom to fail. But when those freedoms are gone and other people make those decisions for you, is the only time you realize what you had. But now you can no longer get it back because you have that type of people that are preventing it. And you make those mistakes in nature, nature corrects you. You make that mistake in social economic values, social nature gets you. And you find out that what you think you were fighting for and you get it, you realize, oh my God, history was right. How could I have done that? Well, by then it's too late.
yeah,
And a lot of these people don't have enough wherewithal in their brain matter. They only have three or more brain cells to rub together, and they're not communicating. So they can't actually think that way through. I have yet to find somebody who believes that communism is a good idea that has an IQ above 6. These are not very bright people.
but the thing is, it's just so right out there in the open. I have lived in the Czech Republic and I have been to I've been to Russia a few times. I have been to other communist countries from Cuba to China. And I can tell you that wherever communism has been, the people are miserable. Miserable. There's no smiling in the Soviet Union. You do not invite a conversation with somebody that you don't know. Because if I was a loving parent, that's what I'm going to teach my child. Because in the past, they used to send you to the gulags when 1 in 3 East Germans was a Stasi agent. So
Mhm.
if as a loving parent and I love my kid, I'm going to teach them not to interact with anybody, which is why smiles, especially among anybody who's 35 plus in the former Soviet republics, are minimal at best, if not non-existent. And people embrace communism and say this is what we must do, despite the track record.
Well, let me tell you a short story. Um, I'm not going to tell you where this was until the end, but I'll just tell you some of the atrocities that I saw. I saw a mass grave of 126 women and children that were killed by machete to keep it quiet. And they were buried in a shallow grave. The only reason I found them, my buddy and I found them, is we found a mummified baby that for some reason no animals touched. And I do not understand why. It's almost like the animals themselves were horrified at the event and wouldn't even feed on this little corpse. And then shortly after that, my friend was killed. He was shot and then burned to death. And I had to carry him for 3 days out of the jungle. And then I have seen children that were too young to rape chicken wired onto a fence so the ants could eat them alive and their parents could hear. I've seen this myself. They've called the FARC in Colombia, and the Biden administration just pardoned all of them. I want you to let that sink in. My friend is dead. I discovered all those bodies, and the Biden administration pardoned all of them. Those murderers, those rapists, those child molesters, they're free. And they're roaming all over the place, and Colombia is totally fine to immigrate to the United States. So who's next door to you? Do you know? So I just want you to understand there's some terrible things in the world that are coming very close to home right now. And that's why I'd go to the sea, because to me, hanging on a giant squid or a big shark or filming a whale feeding in close proximity, to me, that's sanity, because that's God's creation. That's natural. That's the way it should be. And it keeps me sane. And I haven't even told you the bad things I've seen.
Um,
So it's hard for a parent to realize this, but the protection of children comes with what good people with Christian Judeo values have set up. That's what this country was founded on. And it has been a beacon of freedom and liberty to the world for over 250 years for a reason. And people risk their lives to die to come to this country for a reason. Let's keep that shining light going a little longer, shall we?
God bless. God bless. That is exactly why I love America. Now, I haven't seen what you've seen. I haven't seen that. And I'm glad not to have, because I think that I would want to kill every single motherfucking one of those people the moment that I came across them. I'm sure that's a natural instinct that most men would have.
Yeah, that's what I
And,
heard. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen my share of crap, but not like that. I mean, I don't know what to, there's nothing that I can say that's going to make that right for me, for the audience, because that's all too real and that's what you hear about, but you can't actually internalize it until it's right there in front of you and you can smell it and you can feel it. It's the same thing when you are around the immiserated people that have been in these communist run countries, that you can sense it, you can feel there's a coldness in the air the moment you step into Moscow.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's just, and this is not even facing death. This is the posthumous time, the moments that have come after millions of people have been killed. When you're in Cambodia and you pick up bone fragments off of the ground of the killing fields, that's about as close as what I've come to what you've told me. And to think that those were babies, and I have 3 young kids right now with a 4th on the way, and to think that those were babies that were trying just to be live and to be raised by their parents, and they were just slaughtered with their head against the trees because they weren't worth wasting a bullet on. And so they just smash their heads into the trees. And it's like you go there and you see the skulls piled up high. I mean, that's not close to what you've experienced.
That's
But
close
yes,
enough.
and this is what we must protect. We must protect the freedoms that we have. Otherwise, we're going to end up like that. And you're already seeing the divide in America between the crazy left and sane people. Let's just put it like that.
Yeah. I spent, a couple of decades in the military, and I loved every minute of it. And to me, a soldier is green. There is no color. It doesn't matter. They're green because they're your brother in arms. They're your sister in arms. So where they come from, their creed, their color, their religion, anything like that, it doesn't make a damn bit of difference, because you put them in uniform, you train them to be a soldier, you get put in the same situation as them. They have your back, you have theirs, and there's a brotherly love that it transcends anything that I've seen outside the military. And when I see the division in America, It's incredible because in the army back in my day, which isn't that long ago, you were one color, you were green, and if you had a racist problem, you were thrown out or you were put in a position where you didn't do anything good. You know, basically a mess cook for or a mess cook helper for the rest of your career, and you weren't allowed to retire. I mean, the unity of the military forces and the brotherhoods that I lived in perpetuates to me this day. I don't see color at all. I see the character of personality. I care the character of spirit. I sadly, since I have seen so many killers, um, I can walk down the street right here in Napa, and I can see somebody, and I can see them. I can see they're one step removed from being a murderer, child murderer, rapist, the worst of humanity. And you know why they're not? Because they know they'll get in trouble in this country.
They don't know that too much anymore, especially in California.
Yeah, that's true. That's
I
very
mean, they're
true.
letting go criminals that have literally killed people. They like plead it down to a jaywalking violation and give them the $25 fine and say, be on your way. I mean, that's a slight exaggeration, but it's
Just a
not too
little bit.
far. And
Well, that's why I study ocean. That's why I'm a sub pilot. That's why.
there's a
Uh,
question that I have to ask you.
yes,
What is it? And if you can describe it in words, because you might not be able to, because a lot of times I think that we all get feelings about people and we don't know where that data is coming from. But how, given your experience, can you look at somebody walking down the street and be able to see them as that one step removed from a killer?
you know, a killer is somebody who has very little or no remorse, and they have the mental capability to disconnect from people, and they have the physical prowess to do it. You don't need a lot, depending on what you use as your weapon, but you need enough. And you can tell by the way they square off and position themselves to strangers. You can tell with the confidence on how they down look at somebody. And you can tell by the eye contact when you lock eyes with theirs. You can see it instantly. Once you've seen it, like the first time I ever saw that was in Colombia. And it was, I won't tell you the rest of the story, but he didn't live long. But you can't unsee it. And you recognize it instantly from that point on. And I have seen it in Bosnia. I've seen it in Somalia. I've seen it in Central and South America. I've seen it in Iraq. And you're never wrong. Once you see it, you know what it is. And again, you're looking square in the face of evil because they disconnect from the cause and effect of life. In other words, if I do a crime, I'm not going to get in trouble. Ooh, I can play. Now, what's the level of play? Sometimes it's creative to enough of being the most sick, murdering bastard you can imagine. And so the law enforcement is so much more valuable than people give them credit for, just their presence, even if they're not doing anything. To somebody who has just an inkling of, hey, you know what? I have enough ego and narcissism in my life where I don't want to spend any time in jail. So I'm not going to rape that woman because there's a cop nearby. So sometimes a cop just being in the area has saved so many people from harm.
And all the defund the police rhetoric from the left and the Democrats. It's just, how do they think this is going to end? And is it intentional? Do they really believe what they're saying? Or are they just grifting for votes in order to get into people's black hearts that seem to have holes in them that need to be filled constantly?
You need to read Karl Marx's book. You really should pen through it. You'll see that the process is being executed by people who are trained Marxists.
Mm-hmm.
Say, by the way, Marxism is one of the most evil, quickest transitions into full-blown communism. It is not a good thing. There has
No,
never there has never been a Marxist regime that has ever not caused genocide.
no,
Never.
there hasn't. Not one, not even in Cuba, which is probably the best form of communism that we've seen. And I have relatives that were in Cuba, so I
Oh,
was in Cuba when Castro was still in power in the late 90s when I was
oh
in
my.
college. And, you saw the poverty. I mean, it wasn't as miserable as the Soviet Union, but it definitely wasn't Napa Valley, California or Santa Barbara.
The wonderful fortress that is the United States of America. I say fortress because it's it has a spiritual protection that's it's waning, it's disappearing, but it has been. I mean, when you go into a war torn area or a place that has war, you can feel it in the air. Everybody there exists differently. And then when you leave that, which some people refer to them as shitholes, and I happen to agree with that statement. But when you leave that and you come back to the United States, as soon as you land in America and that door opens up and you smell America, you can smell it, you can
Mhm.
feel it.
Mhm.
And if you haven't been in those areas where those people that are surviving looking over their shoulder, they're oppressed, they live in fear, they live in these tiny fine line templates so that they don't get murdered, so that their children aren't raped, so that their kids aren't abducted, and there somebody doesn't come and take their house and finances because it's nice looking. If you haven't lived there, you have no right to challenge the way America works. If
Yeah.
you challenge the way America works, pause and go to China and live there for 6 months, or go to Cuba, live there for 6 months. Go to Somalia if you dare. You're brave enough. You got some nuts, and go ahead and try living there for 6 months. See how well you do. You even
Mhm.
go to some place which is a country that I happen to love, which is South Africa. Go to Johannesburg and live there for 6 months. And then when you come back with the understanding and experience of what reality is, now look at America and you really look in the mirror and say, do I want to change that?
Well,
And
the
it's
answer
because
obviously is no for anybody who's been there who is not dead set on destroying America. And I've been to most of the places that you've named. I've been to 60 countries and I've lived in seven.
oh,
And
you're
I
amazing.
was that.
You're amazing.
No,
That's
I haven't
incredible.
done nearly what you have. I'm just saying that in
Uh,
terms of the fact that I have some experience that you're talking about, but not at the same level. Like I've been in shithole countries. I was in Syria
oh,
right before everything blew up, and I was the only. I went with two other people, went deep into the desert, and I was treated exquisitely well. I mean, we went into Bedouin tents, and the children there were so excited to see me because they had never seen a white person with green eyes. So they were just like they were at first scared, and the moment I started to play monster with them, just chase them around and play monster. But this is they warmed up to me. But this is the middle of the Bedouin tent, and I have nothing against these people. I was treated beautifully, but I was the only person there without a gun, and they were just shooting birds out in the middle of the desert. That's how you wake up in the morning, just with the fire and just mass numbers of birds just piled up. And it's not a place that you want to go back to because you realize how great America is after you leave there, and I believe that Americans have to travel to gain an appreciation. And I believe that with people being ever more isolated and being able to be by themselves playing video games all day, we lose that affinity for being with other human beings. And we think that we can be by ourselves and we are no longer responsible to a larger social dynamic in order to survive. So I think that technology is changing human impetus and the equation as to behavior. If I'm with you in person, I have to give you respect. If I'm with you on Twitter, I can type whatever the hell I want. And it's a very different. And then people take that in, and it does change the dynamics of society, unfortunately, which is part of why we're seeing this deterioration, as you say, in the American spirit.
well, it's a virus, and the cure is experience outside, abroad. And you know, like I said, there's a there's a tremendous evil in lots of places, and if you haven't seen it, it's easy to pretend it's not there. And you just go to Walmart and buy what you're going to do, and just say, "Oh my God, that's terrible. I wonder if I can send some money to help those poor kids." So you give them $10, and your conscience is clean, and you go on to go to Dairy Queen. But the reality is this is coming here, and pretty soon we're going to be in a situation um, that I honestly can't describe and not weep. Um, I've lived it. I've been there in these places, and I was so proud to come back to this country. And the thought that we may actually reduced to that level, it breaks my heart more than I can express, and not weep. It's
Fortress of America
Unbelievable.
is being burnt down from the inside by those who call themselves woke and compassionate, who are just lighting everything on fire.
Well, the woke and compassionate are nothing more than brown shirt Nazis or Mao Zedong's killing fleets or the Gestapo. They are the same level of idiocy, horrific hate, and lack of experience in real life. That's who they chose to be those terrible people in our history. And they are Antifa, they are the BLM, they are all these people that will go into a city and yank a white person out of the car and beat them almost to death just because of his skin color and get away with it because
Oh
the
yeah.
people that are running the area are actually condoning that behavior because that's part of the overthrow by reading Karl Marx's book in which they're following.
Yuri Bezmenov, are you familiar with his speech, with his talk from 1983, the ex-KGB agent who described the whole subversion of America? He described it in a lecture. He's a former KGB agent in 1983. He gave a lecture describing everything that you're saying pretty much in terms of subverting the America by digging into the institutions, by overthrowing the institutions like the church, like the Boy Scouts, to go after the education system, to subvert young children's minds and implant these Marxist ideals into them. So I'm
Mhm.
sure that's very akin to what Karl Marx wrote.
No,
But
you're actually very correct. It is exactly because when you get them young and you form, first of all, influx of illegal immigrants, the training of our youth to be Marxists, the destabilization of areas like in crime, like in economy, so that more and more people rely on the government just to exist day to day, breaks down the fiber. The last thing is removing people's ability to defend themselves, which is exactly what they did in Venezuela. One of the first things they did before the Marxists stepped up and pulled all of their shenanigans, the last straw was that they outlawed guns and they had Gestapo type people go and recover all the guns, and then communism hit because nobody could defend themselves.
mm-hmm.
I
That's the
mean,
same thing that they did in every single country, from
yes,
Germany to Russia to China to
yes.
Venezuela. It's everywhere that you remove people's ability to defend themselves. And of course, the government comes in and seizes more and more of your power. So all the people that say, I used to be, because I grew up in a left center household. Actually, I was the furthest right, and the rest of my family were pretty much socialists. Or, my dad grew up under communism in Poland, but somehow he didn't think it was all that bad, but he wasn't totally pro-communism or anything like that. But, I used to be like 50-50 on the Second Amendment. I wish that we could live in a society without guns where nobody would be able to kill somebody else. But now I recognize, after seeing them state, don't you dare defend yourself because we will send the full weight of law enforcement after you if you do. And we're going to let BLM burn down your house and assault you, and Antifa to do the same. I recognize that Kyle Rittenhouse needed to have a gun in order to stay alive. The good thing is that we have the Second Amendment, and as hard as the leftists and the Democrats are trying to take away our guns, it's going to be a little bit harder in America. Thank God for that.
Yeah,
Um,
I hope it continues that way. I truly do because I happen to love my country. I happen to love the fact that I've gone to several different countries as a medic and I've inoculated people, I've fed people, I've been there with engineers helping them drill wells. I've uh, I've actually been able to clean water supplies with filtration systems that I help install so that people, stop getting different, dysentery or waterborne diseases. And I've done a lot of those things. You know why? Because I'm American. I'm an American and I love God and I love all people. And I've been able to go into foreign countries and help people. I tell you what, I've helped a lot more people in my life than I've hurt. And I've been in some terrible situations where a lot of people got hurt. And so I've definitely been the side of good, much more than I've been the side of self defense. And that's because I wear the stars and stripes on my shoulder. And so I'm very proud of that. And, remember back after Vietnam, soldiers that would come back, they would get spit on. They'd be called baby killers. They'd be shunned.
I just can't understand that.
It's happening now again. I still wear uniforms from time to time whenever I have to bury a comrade. And recently in San Francisco, we had just finished folding the flag over the coffin of this husband who was being laid to rest, military hero. And I was on my knee and I was presenting the flag to the widow, and a car of what I call wokesters drove by and screamed as loud as they could, "Fuck you for your service." Now, I want that to sink in. This wife who just lost her husband and a military war hero was being laid to rest. And as she's getting the flag over her husband's coffin, that's what she hears. You think she's ever going to forget that?
Absolutely not.
I've had so many people flip me off when I'm in uniform here in California driving to funerals because they recognize, oh, he's Army, and they flip me off.
I
So,
I am
you
ashamed
have to play
right
God.
now of my fellow Californians. I'm just ashamed that Americans would behave in such a manner that they've been taught that those who defend them, that defend their freedoms and their vast wealth, vast. You have been to Colombia. I've been to Colombia as well. You can go. I've been out in the middle of the rainforest on the eastern side doing the trek to the Lost City, if you know
Oh,
that.
yeah.
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 And
I know what you're talking about. I know the exact area you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, Santa Margarita, or
Yeah.
is
I
that
think
it?
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you go out there and you see people that are still living in the jungle the way they did. Almost they might have cell phones that work on occasion, but they've been living the same way for the last several hundred years. And you want to see poverty? Why don't you go there and you cry that the prices at Walmart have risen? Where you go to the middle of Cambodia and you see the workers that are coming back from their shift on cattle cars. They're just packed in on cattle cars. And these are people that are working for $1 a day. And I think that they tried to get a $5 raise a week when I was there. I remember that. And they had to put down the strike. I believe it was partially violent. They let it be known that you don't dare strike over an extra $5 a week.
Oof, that's rough.
It's brutal. It's brutal. And the people here say, oh my God, I'm so mistreated. Because again, what you said, that the antidote to wokeism is the experience of living abroad. When you realize how lucky you are that you are in the 1% of the world just by the fact that you are an American,
Mhm.
just by the fact that you are lucky enough to have been born in America and wield that American passport. And then they flip off and they scream "F you for your service" to a widow. It's so beyond disrespectful. And these people they have a mind virus. It's something that is afflicting their mind, and none of them are happy. I have a sister who is woke as woke can be. The exact opposite is me. I'm incredibly happy. I'm incredibly grateful every day. I have an American flag behind me.
I
I
saw that.
love
Thank you.
I love my country. I love because I've been to all those other countries, as have you. And my sister just is miserable, a woke, miserable person that I don't even talk to anymore because there's no point.
I think that's one of the criteria of being woke. You have to be a miserable, hateful person because I've seen enough woke people to realize I pity them. They have no love. They're just full of hate. They're evil.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
angry. And
It's
they have the ability to change that, but they like being wrapped up in that pain blanket. Don't
it's
take away that pain blanket. They want to stay miserable.
I don't understand it. And again, it's just that it's a choice in terms of what you focus on. I mean, you focus on getting a little bit better every day, and suddenly you find your life improving, 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 even if it's not easy at first, even if it's that first step. And there's always people that are going to be willing to assist you with that step. So I just encourage anybody who's woke, who's listening to this right now, just think about one way that you can make your own life better and stop concentrating on other people's lives. Just make your own life better. You make your life a little bit better and you benefit somebody just a little bit when you're around them, and your life will start to increase in terms of your happiness level. And you focus on that, and that's what you'll get. Instead, you focus on immiserating yourself and yelling "F you" to a widow as he buries her war hero husband.
Yeah, it was painful. Yeah. I still have some anger about that. But you know what really helps people, I think, that are in any position of illness, including wokeism, mental illness, which is a tragic virus that I think is killing much of our youth into being mindless, useless people. But if these useless people decide they really want to heal and maybe find some joy, help somebody else get out of themselves for a minute and do something nice. Open up a lady's door.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
say good morning to some old man who you can tell is in pain and he's traveling. He's just having a hard time walking. Just say good morning, sir. You know, just to start there and
Start
work.
there.
Yeah. And if you really want to do something nice, maybe you ought to consider helping somebody out of a bind. Somebody that's had something bad happen to them. Maybe you can do something nice for them. It's amazing what giving somebody who's homeless a warm biscuit will do for their day. So get out of yourself for a bit. You're
Uh,
you're you're not that important. Trust me. That's the thing that I think about wokies is that they really think they're important somehow, and they're not. No,
no.
what's important?
They're they're
Making the world.
miserable. What's important is like love. What's important is service. When you
Yes.
love your child, when you're there serving them, that is the greatest feeling in the world, even if it's painful sometimes because you're helping them grow. And the same thing with anybody else. I had a roommate when after I graduated from college and we were starting to make our way in the world, who I loved. And the reason that I loved him is because I realized that he made everybody's day just a little bit brighter. He would have food waiting for you. He would cook something. He would set something up and say, "Hey, I videotaped this thing on TV for you." Whatever it was, he went out of his way to make somebody else's life a little bit better, and everything good flowed to him. And the opposite, we had another roommate by the name of Henry, and he always was selfish and wanted everything to come to him, and nobody liked him. And he left, and I don't even know where he is, but I'm still in contact 20 years later with my friend Marcus, who was like that. And so my thing is just make somebody's life, like you said, Scott, just make somebody's life just a little bit better, and you'll feel good yourself. And that energy gets extended to them, and their life is better. And then that ripples out, and you never know how far it's going to ripple. It's like what we were talking about in terms of the food chain and the shark eating the soup, the shark fin soup. And the more you consume sharks, how that changes the bear activity in Alaska. So it's the same thing. It ripples out and in a positive way. Or you can be miserable people and make other people's lives hell. And what do you think your life is going to be? It's going to be hell.
Yeah. You have to look back and realize I've hurt people. I've done bad things. Why would you be proud of that exactly? I don't know about you, but I would be a lot more proud um, getting a dog biting a children off, getting the dog off a kid that's screaming, or picking a kid up that fell down and make sure their knees are all scrubbed up and
Of course.
help them get home. Just taking care of people that are minor than you. And when I say minor than you, anybody who's having a bad day, young or old, or anybody who's having a little worse day than you, just reach out just for a little bit and help them out. It's incredible how you'll feel.
Absolutely. It's the way out of misery, and it makes your life better and those around you better. That
It's
is the
too bad, but
simple key to success. I'm not successful really. Yes, I worked hard, but I'm not really successful for any other reason. I had things bestowed upon me that, frankly, I didn't deserve because I made other people feel really good and they wanted to reciprocate. It's a reciprocal thing in this life. That's how it works.
yeah, exactly. Again, that's why I focus my life on the ocean because, you know, maybe I can't get along very well with people because I know too much, but I can definitely do something that can help with their survival by making sure at least one small component of the ocean is just a little bit healthier because I was there. I can report what I see, and I've had some wonderful people in my life tell me that my camera has helped them see things that they never would have seen because they don't go there. And the camera is an eye that can educate better than any scientific book. If you see behavior of an animal that's difficult to see, and a scientist haven't ever had the opportunity to study it like that, you've just contributed something to human knowledge base, and you're having fun doing it because you're healthy enough, you're physical enough, you're trained enough, you're in harmony with the sea enough to get into that environment where you got to film that, and that's an extraordinary thing. And
Yeah.
that's how I try to help people now. Is day to day I go by, I open ladies' doors and stuff. Of course, I'm what they call a man. So I take charge and responsibility for everything in my life. But at the same time, I recover in the ocean, and she's my mom. She's getting her ass kicked right now by overfishing and pollution and plastics and acoustic signatures in the sea and wind farms in the sea killing whales. I mean, the ocean's getting her ass kicked right now. What kind of a son would I be if I'm going to sit by and watch my mom get her ass kicked?
What is the way to fix that which is taking place to the ocean? What can we do as individuals in order to help protect the sea?
Well, knowledge is power. And I say that with a laugh right now because the internet is not knowledge anymore. It's a bunch of people trying to spew their opinion on you. So, really, if you want to know about the ocean, get the hell off the internet and pick up a book that somebody wrote down that actually knows what they're talking about, or talk to somebody who's actually been an ocean guy. But the biggest thing that I can say right now, there's several species of fish that are being so overfished, and the politics of the commercial fisheries are saying that's a sustainable species that's doing okay. Well, let me ask you a question. When you go to your supermarket, do you get elephant meat?
Of course not.
Do you get monkey meat?
No,
What about condor legs,
never have.
squirrel meat, maybe
Nope.
even deer? What we don't, what we do is we eat animals that we harvest through production, right? And we do the same thing with plants. And so the natural species would be wiped out if we kept eating gorillas and deer and squirrels. We are a growing population of humanity that requires a huge sustainment of caloric intake. And the animals in the wild couldn't sustain us for more than a very short period of time. And extinction events would be happening weekly. Why do you think eating a wild caught salmon makes any difference than eating a monkey? Where the hell is your mind if you think that eating a marlin is any better than eating a koala bear? You're an idiot. The reality is that we are depleting the oceans the same way as if we're going into the woods and shooting squirrels and deer and any other animal that we love. So the oceans can't handle it. The human population is growing too fast. So how about if you reconsider that erroneous feeling that a lot of people have that they simply won't eat a farm raised fish because that's bad for the environment? Have you ever heard of such a more stupid thing to say? Because have you ever been to a farm that raises cattle? Have you ever gone by and smelled it?
Yeah, it
Every
stinks.
time, yeah, every time we corral an animal and we populate it and we breed it and we slaughter it and we put it into the food, there's going to be some impact. But it's a whole lot better than eating all the elephants. It's a whole lot better than eating zebra. So that's the reality of the oceans. And people say, oh, I want to eat a wild caught salmon because I'm a pompous ass. I'm a health nut. Well, that's that shows a problem with the way people look at reality when they say I'd rather catch and eat a gibbon than I would rather eat a chicken. So I'd really like to hear more people eating farm raised fish. And here's the thing: if there's more demand for farm raised fish and you remove the pressure, some of the pressure on these wild caught species, more demand for farm raised fish, they're going to get better at it. They're going to have more income. They're going to improve. They're going to make it more ecologically sound and less impactful. And
Are
that
they
makes
as nutritious as the because I was in Norway and they showed me the difference between they cut open a wild salmon and a farm raised salmon because they're very famous in Norway for raising the farm raised salmon. They're big, huge pools out in the fjords.
yeah, I've
And
actually installed some of those underwater as a commercial diver.
you have
Yeah,
very
yeah,
cool.
yeah, they
Very
are.
cool.
They're amazing.
But are they, can you tell the audience, like, what is the difference in nutrition level and the health level between the fish?
Well, the way that they look is going to be different because the farm raised salmon usually aren't as pink. That's because the diet is different. The salmon out in the wild will eat more animals that will make their flesh pink. But the fact is, genetically, they are a salmon. They grow the same. They have the same metabolic rate. They have the same DNA. It's a salmon. The difference is the way it's fed, and if they are inescapably attacked by parasites, they will use antibiotics or a parasite to kill them. And that's true. But it's better than finding a worm in the deer meat that you just bought out of Kroger. The fact is that if you buy fish that are farm raised, they are healthy. They are fine. Just
What
you
about
know,
all the stories that we hear about, like tilapia, that are raised in very unsanitary conditions, for example, in Vietnam?
you ever seen where a pig lives?
Okay.
So I mean, really, I mean, how whiny is the person going to be? The fact is that if you buy more and if you demand that they're raised in clean and safe and humanitarian environments, they're not mistreated, of course, because we're still going to eat them, we're still going to kill them, but it doesn't mean they have to have a miserable life in the meantime. Um, so there are ways to do that. Well, advocate for that and stop eating gibbons and stop eating koala bears. I mean, there's a wild caught fish that you sport that you catch and you bring it home and you eat it. That's a whole industry that I support. But the commercial fishing, I mean, I have ridden, I'm not kidding you on this. I have hunted and filmed illegal commercial fishing and turned the footage over for prosecution in lots of countries. And I've risked my ass hanging on nets, dragging on the bottom hundreds of feet deep and bad visibility just to film the damage that those nets do. And I mean, if you think that eating a shrimp is a responsible thing to do, you should you should just go to Baja, northern Baja, and then watch the shrimp boat go by, and then come back the next morning and look on the beach and see all the animals that net killed. Sea turtles, dolphins, I mean, seals, different types of fish, eels, all types of animal dead and rotted up on the shoreline because they're catching shrimp. I mean, it's unbelievably destructive. And I just want to eat some shrimp and have that little sauce. You have no idea how destructive you just were eating that shrimp.
Wow.
Instead, maybe you could eat a crab, which is caught where very little environmental damage. You know what I mean? Very little. Trap rests on the bottom with fish in there. A bunch of crabs crawl inside there. They pick them up. Crabs are fast reproducing animals. They taste very good. They some people are allergic to shrimp or allergic to crab, so it's a good, very healthy meat. You know, so just look at where it's coming from, really.
Huh. Wow. And well, I guess that we can delve into, because you're such an ocean expert. How many times have you been in a submarine? How many hours have you spent submerged in one of those?
Well, I've got 15. I was playing with the hours just before I talked to you. I have 15,000 hours underwater over my life, and about 7,000 hours of those are inside subs. Uh,
7,000 hours inside
seven
subs.
7,000 hours inside submarines.
What's the deepest you've gone? Have you gone to the level of the Titanic, that
No,
14,000 feet?
no, I've only been 2,000 feet, but still, that's perpetually abyssally dark, and you'll see incredible things at those depths. I mean, but I've seen some extraordinary things at just 300 feet deep in a submarine. I mean, you don't have to go really deep to see extraordinary things.
What have you seen? What's some of the most extraordinary things you've seen?
So many things. It's hard to pick one. Well, this might get the audience emotion and imagination going. I was at 885 feet deep off Catalina Island, and I had just seen a beautiful white barrel sponge on a rock, and I just settled the antipodes down on the bottom, and we were going to film it because it's an extraordinary rare sponge, and actually it's a coral, and it's just magnificent. And as I'm waiting for the downward thruster um, dust to drift away, and me as a subpilot, I'm always looking for obstructions. You're never relaxed in a submarine ever. You're always looking for a threat because you have people's lives that are relying on you. You're the pilot. You have to keep them safe. You're the captain. You are responsible for lives. And so, I'm looking around for obstructions, and I look and I see something about 100 feet away, and I see it's about human sized, and it's a white glob, and it's going from right to left. And I start looking at it, and I realize it's a spot on a fin. And I'm like, wow, a humpback whale. And then I saw an anal fin, and then I saw a vertical caudal fin. So whatever I saw was a 40-foot long shark.
I
And it
didn't
was
even know that they grew that long except for the
I
whale
didn't
sharks.
either. I mean, I didn't either. A friend of mine, I have a submarine called the Great White, and I've got thousands of dives on that sub. I just love it. It's like a friend. I've dove her for a decade plus, and her name is Great White. She's named after my friend Ralph White, who is he's the guy who filmed Titanic for the movie for James Cameron. He was the cameraman, him and Al Giddings, in the Russian Mir submersible. So a great majority of that footage is Ralph's footage, and he was a submarine camera guy, and he got me into it about 30 years ago. So it's all his fault,
Huh.
and 35 years ago actually. And Ralph was in Hawaii in a Pisces submersible at about 2,000 feet deep with Dr. Eugenia Clark, and they had just gone down there with a meter square by meter square box of frozen fish right on the front of the sub. So they settle on the bottom and they turn all the lights off and they just kind of hang out and drink tea and chat for a while. And then they start to see some movement from bioluminescent movement outside. And so they turn on the red lights and the red light cameras. Now, to the cameras that you're seeing, it looks like white light, but it's actually red light. And all over the place are these 6 and 7 foot long, 7 gill sharks. And they're like, "Oh, this is great." And Eugenia Clark is just in heaven. She's a shark expert, or was. And so I love that woman. She was great. And she was there just admiring all these sharks and collecting really good video. And then it looked like there was a mudslide that occurred right off onto the right. And Ralph noticed it, and the cameras are rolling the whole time. And all of a sudden, this head comes into view, and the head is 8 feet tall.
8 feet
And this
tall?
8 feet tall head comes into view, and it's another 7 gill shark. And this animal is as big as the one that I saw off of California,
40 feet long.
40 feet long. And he filmed this gigantic animal. And there's a lot of the story that people don't know, but people are calling it megalodon on YouTube. It's a 7 gill shark, but it's a magnificently big, potentially a sleeper shark, which is one of those prehistoric sharks. And so this gigantic shark scares away all the females. He's a male. And so, but he can smell the presence of the females, and so he's starting to look around for the females, and all that's there is is the Pisces submersible. So this gigantic, God knows how heavy this shark is, gets up, climbs up on top of this 25-foot long submersible, and starts to become very amorously attracted to it and starts rolling it around inside the mud. And Ralph says, "This is not the way I want to die." And it was just being smashed up. One of the thrusters was destroyed, and he was able to drop the weights and slip out the side of the shark and bolt the surface. But the footage is still the largest shark ever filmed. And I saw one of those off California. And unfortunately, I don't have the footage to prove it. So I don't really tell that story very often. That's one of the big
Okay.
stories, you know. But absolutely magnificent animal. And I mean, I've seen some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen are tiny, and you're looking outside for clearing the sub, and all of a sudden you see this treasure of a life species that's right outside the dome, and you have no idea what it is, and you take a picture of it, and you're just like you send it off to Scripps, you send it off to Woods Hole, and I've done that so many times, and so many times they come back and say, "We got nothing. We have never seen that before."
Wow. So it's like a new life form.
New life form, new species. I've seen
That's
so many
crazy.
in my life. Yeah,
That's crazy. And so when you're in a submarine, how dangerous is it?
not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. But you
Not at
have to
all.
be constantly vigilant.
Yeah, that's the thing is that if you're flying something like a helicopter or an aircraft, you got to look for obstructions. You got to make sure that the aircraft is performing properly inside the loop in which it was designed. You got to make sure that it doesn't stall. You got to make sure that you're not too fast. You got to make sure you don't run out of gas. All these things you have to do, but you're trained to do it. And the machine has been designed by really qualified people that follow a set of rules that are proven. And then there's a regulatory body that makes sure that it is safe and it falls into that engineering category. And then they certify it, and then you're a qualified pilot and you go. Well, diving in submarines is the same thing. I've never had an emergency underwater, and I've got of hours underwater, one of the highest time divers in the world on subs. And I'm very proud of that. I haven't dove the Alvin, I haven't dove a Mir, but I've dove Perry subs, I've dove Kittredge subs, of Newtco subs. I've had so much fun piloting other people's genius developments, but they all follow the rules. My submarine, the Great White, is a Kittredge sub, and she's rated to 250 feet. And everything on the sub is built to standards and practices that were set forth by the American Bureau of Shipping and the pressure vessels for human occupancy. And I've got almost 2,000 dives in that one sub, and that's my personal one. I've got lots of dives in other people's subs. And that's the problem with OceanGate. That's the problem that my friend Stockton Rush made the
Stockton
mistake.
Rush being the owner of OceanGate.
Yeah, Stockton is the owner of OceanGate, and Guillermo Sunline was his partner when I knew him. And they, I came into helping them with their. Stockton had 16 dives in a submarine when I met him, and so my job was basically there just to meet somebody of like interest and show him what I knew.
How
And
long
help
ago was that you met
uh,
him, that you first met him?
2009.
2009.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I did a whole bunch of work with them up there in Washington with Antipodes, which was a magnificent Perry sub, American Bureau of Shipping class submersible, carries 5 people to almost about 1,000 feet. An absolutely wonderful machine. I taught them how to do things in the machine that they had no idea that it could do. How it could hover and move around objects and stuff, and how to pre-dive, how to, make sure everything safety checks and all that stuff. And I found several things that they had done that modified the sub that would have caused the sub to be dangerous.
What were some of those things, just in brief,
Well,
that they did?
one example is I'm crawling up underneath. I inspected the entire sub. I took every panel off. I inspected every nut and bolt in the sub. I took the electronic panels apart inside, and I'm crawling underneath the sub. And I'm looking. They got this 750-pound drop weight. I think that's the weight. Don't quote me on the weight, but it's a big block of lead. And as I'm crawling underneath there, they had installed two very large shackles there for towing the submarine. They thought it'd be better to grab the shackle onto the battery pods, which are on the bottom of the sub. That's what she's lit. That's what she stands on, her battery pods. And they put shackles on there to help tow her, so that they could do a 4-point tow and pull her little nose up, and maybe get a little higher speed when they're towing her out to dive sites. Um, and I tried to help correct that too. You never tow a sub quickly; it's very dangerous. I mean, it's
What makes it
water's
dangerous to tow us up a
well,
little more quickly?
water is 600. Excuse me. Water is 600 times denser than air. So anytime you get wrapped up in a rope or a buoy or drag onto a piece of wood or something like that, it beats the hell out of the sub.
Uh-huh.
And so you just don't want to tow a sub fast, because they always snag stuff. They always get damaged during tows. That's why it's best to pull them out of the water entirely before you go anywhere, because when you tow a sub in the water, they get beat up bad. Um,
Uh-huh.
I can't tell you how many thousands of dollars I've wasted repairing subs after somebody tows them too fast or improperly. Or in one case last year, I got dragged into the 7 Mile Bridge in Florida while being towed out to a dive site, which cost me thousands of dollars. So the point is, underneath the sub, I'm looking up at these big shackles, and those big shackles with the eyelets poked in would make sure that that drop weight would not be released. If they were in an emergency and had to drop that weight, it wouldn't go anywhere. They were in desperate desire to get off the bottom. They unscrew that weight, it lets loose, and instead of dropping to the bottom and allowing the sub to raise up, it would lock in place and be impossible to drop, condemning them to death. Well, that was just one out of like six or so things I found that they had modified on the sub. And I said, bring it back to code. The American Bureau of Shipping had it set up. Use the same parts, install it the same way, and you're going to be good, because this sub is a Perry boat. This thing was made for the oil industry. This is one of the best subs in the world, Antipodes, and all the Perry subs. They're fantastic for their day. I mean, in my opinion, the Seamobiles from Seamagine are the best subs in the world today. But I'm biased because I happen to be, they originally trained me to be one of their pilots, but I've had the privilege of diving lots of different subs in my life. Perry subs were that's like the '57 Chevy that's perfectly polished when you get to drive it around. It's mechanically perfect. That's a
Hmm.
Perry sub. These things are just gorgeous, reliable, and safe. But you have
Right.
to operate them safely.
And so when you told Stockton to do these repairs, did he do them immediately?
Well, the biggest thing he did was change the drop weight thing because I could see it easily. But I think that some of the things that he wanted to make sure that his modification stayed, he quickly covered back up and didn't let me see if any repairs were done. I'm suspicious about that, but I don't know that he may have repaired them, but I didn't see anybody repairing anything. We dove
Uh-huh.
uh, and it worked, but I mean the Titan worked for a while until it didn't. I mean that sub was condemned to death when it was being built. I mean that was a failure waiting to happen.
So what
So
did he do that you would have done differently? Like, and how
everything.
long did you stay in contact with Stockton? Because it was 2009. When did you part ways with him, or were you still in
Well,
contact?
well, after I dove with him and helped do that training program that I helped set up for his pilots and stuff in Washington, we did a dive, an expedition in Catalina Island in 2010 together with Undersea Voyager Project and OceanGate. Undersea Voyager Project is my company, nonprofit for undersea research. And I had 30 dives planned in 40 days around Catalina Island to really solve some mysteries. And wrecked aircraft was here, a CIA tower was there. People had seen aliens coming in and out of the water over there, which I think is kind of fun. One of the largest populations of giant black sea bass may be breeding over here. All kinds of really cool spots to go around the island. And I had raised a lot of money, and they had raised some money using my name. Um, and when we got there, it went south right away. Um, they knew that it was their sub. They knew that they had control of the finances because I turned it over to them because I wanted to be the sub pilot and mission director. I didn't want to be the expedition coordinator. I've done that a lot. I wanted to have the fun. So I
Mhm.
wanted to be the sub pilot. So I turned that over to them. Bad mistake. They mismanaged money. We were thrown out of our hotels. They had basically frat parties on deck. They had girls in bikinis. They had, I mean, just stupid shit. And it was just embarrassing. It was embarrassing because my name was associated with it. And the out of those 30 dives that I had planned, I did 7.
Wow.
And on the 8th dive, Stockton told me, "Hey Scott, you just stay back today. I'm going to dive and take some of my rich friends diving and try to do some more fundraising." And I said, "I completely understand. We'll be back on track tomorrow. It's a good weather day. We'll be fine. But let's try to keep that to a minimum. I really want this to work because I have my whole future career working around some people that I was inviting to see this operation. They wanted to see it work so that I could build my career. So I'm helping them. They're helping me. It was wonderful." Well, that one of the bikini girls was around there during the pre-diving of the Antipodes, and Guillermo Sunline and Stockton were there, a pilot around these wealthy people. I wasn't there, and the girl took out the battery vent cap because she was a pilot in training. She took out the battery vent cap and didn't bother telling anybody, which means the battery compartment is no longer integrity, water integrity. It's gonna leak. And
I hope that you
Guillermo,
find that out immediately, the moment that you put the
I
sub
mean,
in.
there's a reason that they paint everything in the sub yellow. If you see a big vacant spot that's not supposed to be there, it draws your eye to it. It's incredibly easy to see. Well, Stockton missed it, and this girl watched him miss it. She didn't say anything that she had the plug. I don't know. Maybe she forgot. I don't know. Maybe whatever reason. But they launched the sub and flooded the battery and destroyed the rest of the entire mission. And I lost face big. This cost me huge. Almost a year's worth of work out of my life was lost because of that battery vent plug and Stockton missing something that obvious. And Guillermo, he said, "Yeah, I missed it too." So both of those guys missed it. after I was training them how to pre-dive. They didn't even listen to a word I said. And so they had a emergency in the water. They had to abort the dive, and I think they had like less than 30 dives, and that was two emergency aborts. And I've had 7,000+ hours underwater and never one abort.
And this is directly related to the fact that they are very much unmilitary. In the military, everything has to be perfect. That's why they teach you to spit shine your shoes, right? It's you hit that target, you nail it, because if you don't follow protocols, people die. There's a reality, and it didn't seem like they were very careful and that they were in accord with the physics of the situation. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, they were completely unprofessional, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But everything that we're saying here is my opinion because I saw the stuff. This is from my viewpoint, so of course it's my opinion. But everything I'm saying, my opinion, is based on reality of what I saw. And one of the reality things of what I saw is I had Guillermo inside the sub, and we're down about 250, 300 feet. And he wants to pilot the craft for a while. So I turn the controls over to him, and I go back and start talking with Stockton. And all of a sudden, the starboard thruster won't operate, and we're on the bottom. And so he says, "I don't know what's going on." So well, let me take a look at it, Guillermo. So I take the controls, and he goes, "The thruster's not working on the starboard side." Well, I lean out because there's these giant 50, 52-inch or 54-inch gigantic plexiglass domes on the front of Antipodes. Just a beautiful machine. And I lean out and I'm looking. I can see the thruster and I can see the screws moving. So it's working. They're
Uh-huh.
like, no, 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 it's not working. It's not working. I go, I can see it. No, it's not working. So Stockton and Guillermo pull the electrics apart and they start pulling out fuses, micro switches. And they're checking all this stuff. And I'm like, guys, I think we're wrapped up in a net. No, no, I wouldn't have done that, Guillermo said. Okay. So they fiddled with this for about half an hour. And finally I say, look, can I try something? Can you put it all back? I'm going to just try and release this. In case we are fouled, please entertain me. And within a few minutes, I found out that Guillermo had run us into a bright yellow polypropylene rope, and it wrapped around the top of Antipodes and locked us into the bottom. And that's why we couldn't move. And so I was able to work it so that I loosened it up, and I was able to dance the sub thruster around that polypro line and pull out of it. And there it was, this gigantic bright yellow line, and somehow I didn't see it. And so how he got wrapped up in that, I'll never know. It's like, you know, so bright and so obvious, and we're at 250 feet. And in Catalina Island, there's still enough light to see. It's like dusk. It's almost dark, but it's dusk. That yellow polypro stood out like it was illuminated. And we had
Mm.
bright lights on the sub, which made it really stand out like neon. He just wasn't looking where he was going. And there are four other souls in that sub. And he wasn't looking where he was going, and he wrapped us up. So, I mean, if that only happened with some of the few times I dove with them, other than the party atmosphere, the other stuff that was going on that I don't want to know about, but I heard terrible stories. Um, After that expedition, they fired almost everybody except the girl that caused the problem. They promoted her.
Okay, I guess that they had something sexual going on. That's the only thing I can think of. That's pretty obvious.
I think you're getting warm, but
Yeah.
she later went on to, I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to get sued, but because OceanGate is litigious. They are a scary, formidable, sue hungry organization. So I'm not going to say any details on that, but that person, that girl, went on to a major exploration society, and which is famous. And God knows how many headaches she caused there because she
Eh,
was trained not to be safe.
yeah. And you and so when did you finally part ways with Stockton? Like, was 2010, was that it?
Yeah, well, we had a few conversations, back and forth. He invited me to do one dive with, I think it was Buzz Aldrin, and which I told him I really appreciate. I want to do it, and then they never called me back, and I found out it's because I'm white.
What?
Yeah, I'm the wrong color. They wanted diverse young people, not an old white guy. So I was later told that we found somebody else to do it, and the person that replaced me was definitely not me. The way I looked. So I got a kick out of that. But I talked to him a few times over the phone. Now, here's the thing. I like Stockton. I love him as a friend. I really do. He's a sweet man. He's a kind person. He's a very smart person. I can't really say too many nice adjectives about Stockton. But what I will say is that he was fixated on his own ideas, and you don't do new things in the diving industry. The people who developed the American Bureau of Shipping standards and pressure vessels for human occupancy standards, those were the same people, the caliber of engineers that put people on the moon. They did all those stuff back in the 50s and the 60s to do the heyday of scientific exploration in the sea during the same time as Cousteau was powerful and growing. And when I was growing up, there were so many deep submersibles that were built. And that's because they discovered how to do it. And everybody in the world wanted to mine underwater. So they were looking for ways to do that. Every country had a deep submersible that could go to the Titanic. And they're all gone now.
They're all
But
gone. They're out of
they're all
commission,
gone.
or
Well, they faded out. They're all on pedestals out of museums and stuff now. But there were so many deep diving submarines, and none of them had an accident. None of them had an accident. Since the 1950s or 60s, when the deep submersible community was really born, until present day, we have never had an implosion until
until
Stockton.
now.
Until
Until
Stockton.
now. So
And
you could pretty much have predicted that OceanGate might end this way based on the track record that Stockton had. Like,
like I said, I love Stockton, and I hated to think that any harm would ever come to him. But remember what I told you. You know what's most important for a submersible pilot? The souls on board that he's responsible for. You do not ever put people in harm's way. It is just something you don't do. And God bless him, Stockton did exactly that.
and how
There
did
were
he do
lots,
that?
well, there were lots of people smarter than me, lots of brilliant engineers, including some of the ones that trained me to be a sub pilot back in the 90s, um, that were that are now a member of the Marine Technology Society and the people that actually helped develop the standards of building submarines internationally. And these people are my heroes. They're my friends. I know a lot of them. And I'm just a lowly sub pilot and oceaneer, but these are real engineers. These are the real guys. And they trained me to be what I am. And they showed me what works and what doesn't. And several of these people, brilliant people, wrote Stockton a letter saying carbon fiber is going to kill. Don't use it. We can't support that. And he did it anyway. See, the thing about carbon fiber is that it's like fiberglass. And you know what happens to a fiberglass tube if you put enough pressure on it? You can hear it crunch, right?
Hmm.
Well, fiberglass tube and Kevlar or a carbon fiber tube, you put enough power on it, you're going to feel that crunch. You're going to hear that crunch. You know what that is?
What?
Fractures, microscopic fractures, compression of air pockets, that micro air pockets that are inside there, in between the epoxy. In other words, it's not homogeneous. There's all kinds of imperfections through the entire process. Thousands upon thousands of tiny little air pockets that are weaknesses. And whenever that crushes enough and you hear those crunches, that is irreversible damage. Now it's less strong. So the next time you dive it, it's less strong. How much? We've never done an engineering code case on it. Nobody knows how much less powerful or strong it is. So every time that was dove, it was less strong. And every time after that, it was less strong. And you keep weakening it, and crunching it until a catastrophic implosion killed a teenager
Yeah.
and three other souls on board that entrusted their lives to this man. And
And
that is something I think is unforgivable.
when you heard that the submarine went missing, did you know immediately what likely took place?
I knew it imploded on the carbon fiber. I knew it
Just
did.
like that.
I had no doubt.
So why didn't they announce it? Because I understand that the Navy heard the implosion, is what I've understood.
There's the ocean's a noisy place, Richard. I mean, I don't know if you spent much time underwater, but I got to tell you, people. I mean, Jacques Cousteau once said it was the silent world, and I giggle because he's my hero, and he's so
Huh.
wrong. There is so much noise underwater. I've heard avalanches underwater. from 100 miles away.
Wow.
I've heard volcanoes erupting underwater from I don't know how far away. I've heard submarines in the distance using sonar systems to navigate their way. I've had sperm whales ping so loudly that it shocked my chest like I got punched.
Huh.
It's a very loud place underwater. There's a lot of noises. So the fact that the Navy heard something, well, the only way that they found out that it was the sub that imploded was that, hold on a minute, let's look at the time frame and see what we found. Oh, look, there's something. So they had to wait and say, okay, they lost contact with the sub at this time frame, and they looked back on their records, which was tremendous size of sounds, and they said at that particular moment in that time frame, there was a blip right there. So there's no
So
conspiracy.
they could have
Going on.
never known for sure that it was the sub at that moment. But
Not
you knew the moment that the sub went missing that it
I
had
did.
imploded.
I did. I knew it was, and it broke my heart right away. I was weeping for my friend, and the reality is you just don't make a sub hull out of carbon fiber. You just don't do it. You make it out of a metal because you have ductility, you have recovery of metals. It's predictable. Science knows engineering, not science, but science and engineering knows it. You can predict almost exactly when a metal hull will fail. You have no idea.
When the
For a,
carbon fiber will. Well, why did he make it out of carbon fiber?
you know, I if I don't want to get sued by OceanGate, so I'll just keep the answer really light. He had an idea that he wanted to try out because he wanted to be a maverick innovator. And I heard him say that to me, and I heard him say that on the YouTube just recently. And he was a maverick innovator, and it killed a teenager,
And several other people.
several other people.
Yeah, it's. Have you heard of a man by the name of Rob McCallum?
I've heard his name. I don't know him.
Okay, okay. Well, he was one of the people that warned Stockton repeatedly. Of
Ah,
course, Stockton threatened to sue him, and et cetera, which goes along exactly with what you're saying. And he says that in your race to Titanic, you are mirroring that famous catch cry, "She is unsinkable."
oh my God. Well, I believe Mr. McCallum was right then. If I'm not mistaken, I remember reading back in 2017, I think that's the date, when they were really starting to build um, what they were calling at the time Cyclops 2. Um, they were actually wrapping the hull and everything, and they had a Scottish engineer who said it wasn't going to work. So I guess that's him, and he was completely right. And anybody who is in the submersible engineering industry and pilots like myself know that that's not going to be a work in progress. It's going to fail. It's going to fail. You just don't do that. I mean, the Russians were practicing with ceramic hulls back in the 60s, and that was fantastic. But same thing is they're brittle. When do they fracture? It's catastrophic and ugly. You can't predict it. And
Right?
so, and Russia has the edge on the world with titanium. So they built the Russian Mir 1 and 2 out of titanium because to them it's almost as easy to get as stainless steel. So
Hmm.
they built these magnificent subs with 1960s technology, and Cameron used those two antiquated subs that have perfect records using old techniques that work
And he went down and filmed the Titanic for the first time
30,
in those.
33 times,
Wow.
which means there were 66 dives with the Russian Mirs on the Titanic without a single problem, and they were old then. So I want you to just equate that over to the carbon fiber hull, which I think made a total of what less than 30 dives on its entire lifetime, and failed catastrophically and killed all aboard. So, you know, which one would I choose? I would actually choose the engineering proven that works, so that there's models that show when it will fail, and stay the hell away from failure debt.
Exactly.
On
And
my sub, I've got a front port that will fail at 880 feet. So with a 2-to-1 safety ratio, I will never dive my sub below 400 feet because of the front port. I like
right,
that safety margin of another 100%.
right. Makes sense. And
Yeah.
what do you make of the fact that they were using a video game controller to move the sub around?
Well, the controller inside my submarine is old Radio Shack technology that is sturdy, and you can use it to drive nails if you have to, and it's going to keep working. It's just a tough little thing in an aluminum box with a controller and buttons. And that's because the original designers said this is a good way to do it. And the American Bureau of Shipping classified that material as that's appropriate to use in a submarine. Doesn't make a spark, it can't catch fire, it isn't fuel, and it's not going to contribute to any other problem inside the sub, and it works reliably. Use that. Why would you want to use something that would melt in your hands if you got a little fire? That's another thing I saw Stockton do a lot too, and Guillermo, is I would say, okay, when you're diving with me, 100% cotton, or wear a flight suit made out of Nomex like I do, and make sure your socks are also cotton or wool. I don't want anybody wearing fuel. If there's a fire in the sub, I don't want you catching on fire and adding to the problem. And they would constantly wear synthetics inside the sub against my wishes. And it's their sub, but on those dives, I stayed shallow and I watched everything like a hawk. I was scared. It's like I may have to abort the dive if there's even a small fire, because these guys are going to be human torches.
How often does a submarine catch fire? It seems a little bit dichotomous considering the fact that you're submerged in water.
Yeah, I know, really. Yeah, well, you're inside of a little box that has its own life support system, and it's impervious to the pressure, and it has electrical stuff inside of it. So you have to remove some of the triad of the fire, which actually triad is back in my day. I think now they call it a quadrahedron or something like that. So they add a fourth part of it, but you got to have three things to have a fire: oxygen, fuel, and heat. And you just don't want to be the fuel.
Right.
So take that out of the equation and wear something that won't burn.
Right. And do you think that Stockton, why isn't he stated that he did not want to hire 50-year-old white guys, and you told us before that he didn't want you to be the captain of the dive because he wanted to hire a diversity person.
Yeah.
Now, did this possibly, obviously this mindset of going against the laws of physics, of trying to recreate something out of carbon fiber that is going to wear down and eventually, have metal fatigue. But he's going against kind of like the laws of physics. But wouldn't you rather have somebody who's incredibly experienced, who might be able to alert you to a lurking danger like yourself, rather than a younger diversity hire?
That's only if you admit to yourself that undersea exploration is dangerous unless you follow all the rules. Now, if you say to yourself in the mirror, nothing has ever happened to these submersible guys, I don't know what their problems are, it's not that dangerous, we can break some rules and be completely fine. And I need to train young, sexy people. They're going to run around in bikinis and make me look good to the woke crowd. Let's just not worry about some of those safety factors. And I think that was more of his mentality. That's my opinion, but I saw it in real time, and I was told it in real time. But that's my opinion. But you know, the fact is that the people that are submersible pilots, um, I don't know why a lot of us are white. I don't have a clue. I don't really care.
You
The
shouldn't.
fact is, the fact is that if you're a pilot who's had good training and a good record, you self-educate and you mature and responsible for the people that are under your care, and you understand the sea and you know her sea state and weather, and you've dove long enough underwater to know that there are underwater waterfalls, there are underwater rivers, there are underwater storms. You know how to predict them and act appropriately in the sub to keep everybody safe. What's wrong with that?
Absolutely
Does it
nothing.
matter that they're white or black or red or no, it doesn't. I don't
No,
care.
it's the same thing you told me about the Army. The only color that you guys were was green.
Green.
They were your brother in arms. So the
Yeah.
only thing that matters is proficiency. And when you deviate from that, when you try to cut corners, of course, you're going to have repercussions. And that's okay if you're coding and you can do something, and if it breaks, you figure it out and you fix it, then you have more latitude in order to experiment, but not when you're 12,000 feet below the surface of the water and you have pressures that human beings can't even comprehend. I've dove down, the farthest I've been down, I'm a little bit of a wimp. It's been 30 feet, right? 10
Deep enough to
meters.
hurt you.
And you can feel the pressure. You have to readjust. You have to do the breathing properly. It's been a while, so I don't know, but that's at 30 feet. We're talking about 12,000 feet. We're talking about 2.5 miles down below the surface of the water. 6 times, 60 times, as you say, or 6 times as dense as air.
600 times.
600 times as dense as air at 12,000 feet.
Yeah, well,
You can't cut corners.
well, at 12,500 feet, it's roughly 5,500 pounds per square inch. So that's, 2.5 tons every inch. So if you figure out how many square inches you have, there's your pressure. But it's a lot. It's almost incomprehensible. And another failure that I thought was really sad was that if it wasn't the carbon fiber hull, it was going to be that front viewport, because the front viewport was made by some people that I know, and they're razor sharp people. And they built this prototype front port, and they rated it down to roughly 4,000 feet. Okay, 4,000 feet.
4,000 feet, and they're diving to 12,000. So
Remember what I told you is that my viewport is
100% air margin of error for you. 400. You're rated to 800, and you're going to 400.
yeah,
He's rated to 4,000 feet
and
and
he's
going down to 12,000.
yeah, which means the manufacturer, who I don't know this for a fact, but this is how I've talked to them in the past, and this is how they always say the same story to me. And they say they like the 2-to-1 margin of error too. So that means that that viewport would probably fail, catastrophically fail at twice that depth. What is that? That's
8,000.
8,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
They mathematically predicted that it would fail at 8,000 feet, and God bless Stockton, he was going to 12 and beyond.
Well, he managed to do it, so I guess it didn't fail a couple of times, but apparently the amount of wear and tear and metal fatigue, et cetera, it caught up, and so
Yeah, I mean, you can only get away with dodging bullets for so long until you get hit, and
yeah,
that's like I said, I love Stockton. He was a sweet guy. I'm gonna miss him. I'm mourning his death, but this entire catastrophic failure and the death of the teenager and the other people that were on board. And I say teenager because he had his whole life ahead of him.
yeah,
I'm 61. If I die right now, I'm okay. I've had a freaking awesome life. I'm great. If I were 19, I wouldn't feel that way.
yeah,
At 19, you got everything in front of you. And he put his safety on the line for Stockton with a viewport that was anticipated to fail. I'm guessing it's 8,000 feet. And he was diving it to 12. I mean, some of the words that come to mind, they're not good words to align with a friend.
yeah. I understand. I
So
understand, and
everything about this is just heartbreaking. And here's the next thing too is that I own a submarine. I use a submarine for at this point in time I use it for filming, and I also use it for doing 360 filming for Make a Wish Foundation for kids that are expected to die. They can put on the helmet and they can see what the sub does. And we have some really exciting things that we're going to be working on this summer for these kids. And then next year, I'm going to take it back to Florida and do those dives looking for the lionfish population, seeing how we can eradicate that species, which is devastating the Florida reefs. So I'm a part of that effort, and I'm paying for it all myself. And I don't have much money. I'm not rich. I'm not a Stockton. I'm not. Um, so that's what I do for a living. And the submarine is a huge part of it. And it's not ABS classed. It's built exactly to class. It could be classed, but I would have to pay somebody about $50,000 to go through that program of classing it, and I'm the only one in it. So
mhm.
I take the risk. I don't need it to be classed. So, um, and I've talked to many of my friends in the diving industry who just love my old sub. They just think she's a beautiful little workhorse, and I'm very proud of her. What Stockton did and what Guillermo did is potentially going to make people like me have a lot harder time to live because I don't want regulations to come down on my little submarine. I've got thousands of hours without a problem. So what Stockton did is he really muddied the waters for all of us in the submersible industry. He did not do us any favors. He's the first catastrophic implosion in our history. And he wanted to be a maverick engineer. He was. Now, the people that are surviving now, like me and the people in this industry, we're starting to wonder, okay, what's going to happen now? All eyes are on us. We have a perfect safety record. So we don't want the attention from people like Stockton, honestly.
Hmm. Yes, I would definitely be fearing regulations,
Yeah.
that massive amounts of regulations, and you know, in our overregulated environment, you know that they're coming. I'm very sorry that that is the case. Hopefully, for an individual submariner, that you won't have to get that regulated. I think that if you're only putting your life at risk, that you should be able to do that and be able to dive freely. And I'm not a proponent of regulations, but when you have somebody that ended the lives of four people due to arrogance and wokeism and whatever else took form there, then people naturally are going to be asking questions. And there's going to be, of course, anybody, oh, you want me to get in your submarine? I'm not going down 400 feet. I know you're rated to 800. I'm not even going down 2 feet. That's the unfortunate reality today.
Yeah.
You know, you have the
Actually,
scare about
it's kind
something
of
that most
funny.
people didn't even know existed. Most people didn't even know that it was possible to go on a submarine dive, or very few people did, you know, before this. But maybe
Yeah.
maybe after you guys solve it, you'll see an increased demand for your wares and for your services. I mean, because
Yeah.
of all the attention that's being brought. Yeah.
Well, that
That's
could
the
only
bright
be a
side?
good thing, but I somehow don't think that's the case. Whenever, tell me a time whenever the government gets involved, things go smoother.
No, never.
I'd like
Almost
a good
never.
example, please. So,
The only thing, the one thing that I'm thankful for the government for is national parks like Yellowstone, you know,
yeah.
stuff like that that they set aside. That
Well,
was
I agree. I love the FAA. I mean, thank God for them. They keep the world safe in the air.
right,
So that's one of the few examples I can think of.
right.
And
The submarine equivalent might be coming, and unfortunately, that's going to be increased costs for submarine captains like yourself.
yeah, well, that's okay if it's no more difficult than aviation. That's fine because we actually exceed the engineering prowess of aviation engineers. The people that design submarines, I got to tell you, like the guys here in California that build the Sea Imagines, the Seamobiles and the Auroras. I mean, I am so humbled when I go listen to these brilliant engineers talk and look at the quality of the things that they build. It's, I mean, it makes a Rolex watch look like a hand puppet. I mean,
Huh,
these
that's
guys
funny.
really, these guys really know how to build a machine that is just flawless, and they have a complete 100% safety record. And a lot of the subs, I mean, I think every sub built in America and built in Europe have 100% safety records. So I think there's been some Chinese problems, but you know,
That's not surprising.
yeah, built in China. So hey,
Built,
what could
yeah.
go wrong? You know?
No, what could go wrong? Hey, Scott, I really, really enjoyed this talk, and thank you so much for extending your time and your expertise. And I'm sure that lots of people are going to learn a lot about this, not only submarines, but you know, being able to spot a killer and everything else that we discussed. And I would love to do this again with you in the future because I think you're a really interesting guy.
Well, I'm honored and humbled. Thank you for those kind words. I'll work hard to earn them.
No, you have earned them, and thank you for your service, my friend. Thank
Uh,
you for your service.
I will keep that for those that I've lost. Thank you very much for that
Thank
wish.
you, Scott. And I will talk to you soon. And I'll be sending you email when I put things up. I'm going to space these things out. So you're going to, I think we'll start off with like the OceanGate one, and then other things and other things. And then I'll put the whole thing up, which is going to be like over 2.5 hours or something like
Wow,
that.
I'm
So,
honored. Well,
yeah.
God bless you and your family.
Well, thank you. And God bless you and your family too, my friend.
Okay, take care.
Take care. Bye.